Into AWANI tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. 2 weeks into the vaccination drive, when will the job market recover? And we celebrate women who choose to challenge. That's coming up. The labour market remains to be in a sluggish condition. Unemployment rate in January increased slightly to 4.9% against 4.8% in December last year. With the start of the COVID-19 vaccination drive, will we see a job market recovery in the horizon? We speak to public health and health economics expert, Professor Syed Muhammad Al-Junid.
So when the vaccine came, and the vaccines are being implemented for the whole population, of course, it can, to a certain extent, help the companies and also the enterprise SMEs to be revived. And this will actually might actually help to reduce the unemployment rate in long term. But of course, it will take some time, and definitely the vaccine, which is being implemented now as a big program for Malaysia and also other countries, will be of great help. And we hope that we'll be able to see this recovery soon.
Countries such as Indonesia has pushed for a private vaccination scheme as a way for businesses to get their employees to be vaccinated immediately and in turn help the country's battered economy. Should and can businesses in Malaysia explore a similar system?
Our government alone will not be able to do it, to achieve a very good coverage. And the idea is actually for us to have a level of coverage that will be able to achieve immunity, the herd immunity. And certainly, the private companies would probably want to participate, and they want to actually get their employees to be vaccinated so that their businesses can actually move forward as fast as possible. I think this venture should be supported and should be implemented, because there's no way that we can achieve high coverage if we just depend on government facilities, which have a lot of other challenges.
2 weeks into the national COVID-19 vaccination drive, only 139,720 people have been vaccinated. The government said it will secure more vaccines and ramp up vaccination.
Science, Technology and Innovation Minister Khairi Jamaluddin confirmed Malaysia is buying an additional 32 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine Comirnaty. The next delivery of the vaccine is on Thursday, March 11th. While 200,000 doses of the Sinovac vaccine would be arriving in Malaysia in 2 batches, with the first on March 15th and the other on March 19th. Malaysia also reached a supply agreement with Britain's AstraZeneca, Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute and China's CanSino. Malaysia is targeting to inoculate 80% of its 32 million people by February 2022. Meanwhile, individuals who travel overseas in between their first and second COVID-19 vaccine doses will still be subjected to mandatory quarantine upon their return. Health Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Adam Baber said proper guidelines for travellers who have received their complete 2 doses of vaccines are still being drafted by the World Health Organization. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin are among those who have been allowed to travel overseas in between vaccine doses and should be subjected to mandatory quarantine upon his return from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. General practitioners in the private healthcare sector will be involved in administering COVID-19 vaccination shots for Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the National Immunisation Programme. This is done to maximise and broaden the access of the vaccines to Malaysians. They will be managed by Protect Health Sdn Bhd, an incorporated entity formed under the Health Ministry. GPs who are interested can apply to be part of the program through their website protecthealth.com.my.
Pakatan Harapan has begun its seat negotiations process between coalition parties in preparation for the 15th general election. PKR President Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim also did not rule out the possibility of collaborating with other parties, including UMNO, if they champion reforms as well.
Anwar added that Pakatan Harapan will work with anyone who adhered to the party's principle to support good governance, anti-corruption and protecting the rights of all races. Meanwhile, PKR Communications Director Fahmi Fazil said seat negotiation between PH parties would focus on component members before discussions with other opposition-friendly parties took place. The present PH coalition only comprised of 3 component parties, PKR, DAP and Parti Amanah Negara.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Semua dah sedia? Jom! Walau apa pun gerakan atau kepanasan, Sunsilk dengan minyak argan dan pati bunga camellia membersihkan dan menyuburkan rambut secara mendalam, menjadikannya 5 kali lebih lembut dan harum. Sunsilk.
Mampukah rangkaian anda memperkasa organisasi anda bertindak dalam masa nyata? Dengan rangkaian berprogram Maxis, penuhi permintaan perniagaan dengan naik taraf jalur lebar dan kurangkan kos operasi sehingga 30%. Seimbangkan kos dan prestasi dengan kawalan dan pengawasan hebat. Alami rangkaian termaju sekarang agar organisasi anda terus menerajui.
Welcome back to AWANI tonight. On International Women's Day, we celebrate the achievement of women who choose to challenge the status quo and in the process help create a more inclusive environment. Choose to Challenge is a clear call to action for us to be bold and push for change.
I think this year I've really decided that I'm choosing to challenge injustice. I'm choosing to challenge injustice simply because, we cannot continue allowing violence against women to happen, right? We cannot continue allowing gender equality to happen. We cannot just close our eyes towards, the injustice that's happening, towards the communities that surround us, whether is it affecting refugee, migrant or B40 communities. So how do we continue choosing to challenge injustice and speaking up for what is right, not only when it's convenient?
Heidi founded Refuge for the Refugees at 18 years old. The NGO seeks to raise awareness regarding the status of refugees in Malaysia, as well as provide education for refugee children.
A lot of times people think that refugees are here to seek a better life. Refugees are here and they have it easy. They receive handouts. They get a free place to stay. They get an allowance. But that's furthest from the truth. Refugees are people who had to flee the country due to persecution and war. And because of that, they're here in Malaysia, just as a temporary stopover before they get resettled to another country. So how do we stop seeing them as people, so-called outsiders, and how do we start treating them as human beings that are meant to be respected as well and deserve access to basic human rights? I think one of the biggest challenge would definitely be changing people's mindset towards the refugee community, but also just being a young woman leader, right? A lot of times, it's hard to get a seat at a table because I'm young and because I'm female. And even when that happens, when it comes to speaking up and speaking out, a lot of times, I've had people speak over me at meetings simply because they think that I'm young and I've got nothing to contribute. And that has been really frustrating. I think it's time for women to be given a seat at the table, not just because, we are women, not just because we're young, but because we are fully capable and we have good things to contribute. I think my message to you, to those that's listening would be, know your worth and know your identity, know your why, and be consistent to your values, be consistent to your principles, be consistent to what you're called to do. I think that's really important. A lot of times when we venture into something, we expect change to happen overnight. But the truth is, change doesn't happen overnight. But what happens, change can only happen when you're consistent with your values.
Another story we want to highlight today is women in decision-making positions. Managing Director of Value Partners Malaysia, Duraini Baharudin, believes gender should not be a hindrance for women to be in top leadership roles.
I think that is really, it is non-discriminatory. It is the same for men or women in making decisions. It's whether or not you really know your subject matter. And I think this goes back to your own experience within the same industry, understanding different parts of the industry so that you'll be able to have a grasp of the bigger picture, of the finer details of any issues that you may have, that eventually when you're in a power of leadership, you're in a position of leadership and you have to make tough decisions, you're able to do that.
Duraini says the biggest challenge in navigating her career is the lack of female representation in leadership roles that she could emulate.
I think the biggest challenge was actually navigating my own career growth as a woman, and not because I feel that there were any major differences for me relative to another male person in my industry. I think it was largely because I needed a role model. Whilst there are many role models in especially in my industry, in asset management, investment, financial services, but I think the female representation is not very prominent. They're all there. A lot of female leaders there are a lot of female leaders in senior management position, be it in government-linked institutions, private institutions, but they're not as visible as I would say the male counterparts. And with that was a big challenge, because as a young person in the industry, when I started about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, you couldn't really see what is your next, what potentially could be as part of your future, right? As much as, yes, there are gender concerns in the workplace, in many industries, be it investments and all others, in the end of the day, I think you make it on your own, right? If you project that your gender is a reason for you to be less compared to your peers, then I think it would come back to you in the same manner, and that's probably the treatment that you will get. But if you believe that your gender is a non-issue, right, then naturally it will be easier for you as well to be treated the same way.
On to international news. Security forces shot dead 2 people in northern Myanmar today. Local media said the victims were shot in the head during anti-coup protests in the Kachin state. Tensions are running high as security forces have also reportedly started occupying hospitals and universities. They have targeted ambulances and medical personnel in an attempt to arrest wounded people presumed to be protesters. Meanwhile, major trade unions in Myanmar have called on members to shut down the economy as the clash between protesters and the military intensifies. In an exclusive interview with Oprah Winfrey, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle described painful discussions in the royal family. This includes losing royal protection, the color of their son's skin, and the intense pressure that led to Meghan contemplating suicide.
One of the biggest allegations from the interview was that there were conversations within the royal family about how dark Meghan and Harry's baby might be. Meghan also spoke about how lonely she felt after joining the royal family and the loss of her freedom. She said she was on the verge of suicide but was refused help. Harry, meanwhile, revealed he feels let down by his father, Prince Charles. At one point after stepping back as senior royals, Harry said Charles stopped taking his calls.
As the national vaccination drive rolls out, challenges of the registration, vaccine supply, hesitancy and evidence-based policy making remain. Tonight on Consider This, we speak to Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on Public Health, Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud, on what is being done. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. We'll see you tomorrow.
WFH. Siapa sangka 3 huruf ini